All right, so the way that we do talks here at the Seattle Atheist Church is members of the community give the talks. So today that's me. I'm going to give a talk on an article by Greta Christina called "What's the Harm in a Little Woo?" So last week I gave a talk on a book called Crimes Against Logic by Jamie White, which included a section dispelling the commonly held but mistaken notion that any of us have a right to our own opinion. To recap, rights entail duties, and the duties towards me that are imposed on others are what define the rights that I have. When anyone claims a right, first ask, which duties does this right impose on others? That will tell you what the right is supposed to be, and it also provides a good test for whether there is or should be any such right. Of all the duties that the supposed right to your own opinion might impose on others, the only one that withstands scrutiny is the duty of the government not to arrest you or imprison you based on your opinions. It doesn't impose on anyone the duty to agree with you, or the duty to listen to you, or even the duty to let you keep your opinion by refraining from arguing with you about it. The key insight here, according to the author, is that if somebody is interested in believing the truth, then they will not take the presentation of contrary evidence and argument as some kind of injury. They will not behave as if their opinions are somehow sacred, so that everyone else is obliged to handle them with great care. When confronted with counter-arguments, they would pause and wonder if they might be wrong after all. They might even take the correction of their errors as a favor, but they would not take offense. It's just that, on some topics, many people are not really interested in believing the truth. The author then goes on to say that most of his friends, though subscribing to no familiar religion, claim to believe in a superior intelligence or something higher than us. Yet, they will also cheerfully admit the absence of even a shred of evidence. Never mind. There is no cost in this error because the claim is so vague that it has no implications for action, unlike the case of the oncoming car. They just like believing it, perhaps because it would be nice if it were true, or because it helps them get along with their religious parents, or for some other reason. During my talk last week, I put an asterisk here and explained that I don't agree that there's no cost to this error. But that's another talk for another time. Happily, that talk has come sooner than I expected. And I happen to have an article up my sleeve by Greta Christina that elaborates on what the costs of that error might be. Greta Christina has been writing professionally since 1989 on topics including atheism, sexuality, and sex positivity, LGBT issues, politics, culture, and whatever crosses her mind. I've given a couple of talks that included her material in the past, including a talk on some atheist thoughts on death and grieving. She often writes in the first person, so when you hear me say I, that's Greta speaking. I've left most of the article as is, but I did edit a few spots where that will be awkward. Okay, so what's the harm in a little woo? When I write about religion and religious belief, I tend to write about the big ones, the famous ones, the powerful ones, the well-organized ones with millions of followers or more, the multinational brands, the Coke and Pepsi of spirituality. Christianity mostly, since as an American, it's the one I'm most familiar with and the one that's most in my face. But a comment on my blog made me realize that I need to talk about woo as well. In my post about bringing up kids without God, I'd said it took me years, many, many years, to figure out that the notion that God / the soul / etc. Can be definitively disproven didn't mean it's okay to believe anything I want. The commenter replied, okay, maybe, but here's where the believer in me comes out. But what's wrong with believing anything you want? Why isn't that okay? It's one of the fundamental things our country was built on. It's considered part of freedom. Freedom of belief, as well as freedom from belief. I can see why belief in God can be problematic. Well, actually, I don't see why belief in just simply the concept of God is problematic, but rather the belief in all the dogma and crap that the church piles on it. But what about the other things? How does believing in, say, subatomic particles with free will hurt? As long as you're not being held back by dogma, as long as something isn't hurting you emotionally, as long as you don't hurt others with it, why not do it? You once said you were good at reading tarot cards back in your woo-woo days. If it works for you and it works for others, as long as reason stays the guiding point of your life, why not do it? Okay, I've seen this attitude a fair amount among progressives and lefties. The attitude of, the problem with religion isn't the spiritual belief, but the power structure. Or, I don't belong to any organized religion, but I have my own spirituality. And while I see where this attitude comes from, and while many people that I respect hold it, including this commenter, I don't agree with it at all. Yes, I think the power structure of religion is harmful, but I think that spiritual beliefs are harmful as well, even without the power structure. So I want to talk about woo. Neo-paganism, Wicca, goddess worship, astrology, telepathy, visualization, psychic healing, the hodgepodge of Eastern and pre-modern religious beliefs imported into modern America, reincarnation, karma, chakras, shamanism, that have been jumbled together and made palatable to a Western audience, what I call Pier 1 spirituality. Channeling, tarot cards, etc. And I want to talk about why I have a problem with it. I'll say this right up front. While I do think woo is harmful, I certainly don't think it's as harmful as mainstream religion. Mostly because it's not as powerful. It's not as widespread, as wealthy, or as symbiotically intertwined with governments, either subtly or overtly, as, say, the big three, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. So please don't come back to me in the comments with, how can you compare Wicca to Christianity? I'm not. There's a difference in degree, and it's a big one. But the fact that it's not as harmful doesn't mean that it's not harmful at all. There's an obvious, practical, direct way that woo can do harm, and that's the fact that false premises lead to bad decisions. Woo beliefs are untested and untestable at best, tested and demonstrably false at worst. And basing your life on a false premise is going to lead you to bad decisions. Garbage in, garbage out, as the data processors say. And I think this shows up most obviously when it comes to medicine. When I was working as a counselor for the birth control/abortion clinic, we had a client who came in for a cervical cap. I asked her what birth control method she was currently using, and she answered, visualization. Really? She and her partner protected themselves from unwanted pregnancy by visualizing a protective barrier of white light over her cervix, shielding it from the sperm. She had decided to switch to the cap, not because she decided that visualization was bullshit, but because she was concerned that she unconsciously wanted to get pregnant and feared that this would make the visualization ineffective. Poke holes in the white light diaphragm, I guess. Talk about an unfalsifiable hypothesis. If she didn't get pregnant, visualization worked. And if she did, it's because she wasn't doing it right. So that's part of what I'm talking about. If you believe in the visualization method of birth control, you're a lot more likely to get pregnant when you don't want to. If you believe in psychic healing or the manipulation of the chi energy or whatever, you're a lot less likely to seek tested medical help for your injured leg or your cancer or whatever. And you're more likely to give up on conventional medicine when it takes longer than you want it to, or takes more work and trial and error than you're willing to give it, or is partly effective but not completely. That's some real, practical, physical harm done by woo. But this principle doesn't just apply to medical woo. I once worked in an office with cats. No, this isn't a tangent. Bear with me. One of whom was pathologically shy and terrified of most people, but had come to trust me and be very attached to me, pretty much to the exclusion of everyone else. When I left that job, I'd been there for several years, I was worried that the cat would freak out without me around and asked my boss if I could take the cat home with me. Rather than consider the question on its own merits, my boss called an animal psychic who did a consultation over the phone and told her the cat wanted to stay in the office. My boss explained this to me as if it had the force of complete authority, as if the psychic's verdict completely and inarguably settled the question. I'm not saying that this was an easy decision to make. I'm saying that it should have been made by me and my boss, who knew the cat and knew the situation. It should not have been made by a pet psychic who never met any of us in person and who made the decision over the phone. I could give example after example of this. If you believe that your horoscopes and tarot readings are all pointing to serious love relationship coming soon, you're not going to make smart or careful decisions about your dating life. If you believe in reincarnation, you're going to be a lot more careless about taking advantage of once-in-a-lifetime opportunities and experiences. If you believe that the tarot is telling you that to weather the rough spots in your current relationship and that there's light at the end of the tunnel, you're going to stay in a bad, destructive, and hopeless relationship for a lot longer than you should. You might even marry the guy. All these examples are from Greta's own life, by the way. So that's the most direct and immediate way that woo can do harm. False premises lead to bad decisions, and untestable hypotheses make it impossible for you to evaluate your decision-making process and make changes to it. Garbage in, garbage out. But there's an equally important, if less immediate way in which woo can do harm. And that's that it leads people away from valuing reason and evidence and reality. Woo, like every other religious or spiritual belief, ultimately prioritizes faith over reason, personal experience over external evidence. I'm not saying that religious and spiritual belief completely eradicates reason or concern for evidence. I'm saying that when it comes down to a hard choice between the two, it encourages people to reject reason and evidence in favor of personal feeling and experience. Religious and spiritual belief encourages people to believe in their own feelings and instincts, even when those feelings and instincts are contradicted by reality or logic. It discourages people from being aware of the fact that their feelings and instincts can be easily deceived, played on by con artists and charlatans, or just by our own wishful thinking. It discourages people from being aware of this well-documented fact and trying to stay vigilant about it. Every unsupported belief you hold makes you that much more vulnerable to other ones, and that much less likely to value skepticism and critical thinking at all. I think this is important. I think that reality is important. I think reality is just about the most important thing there is. And I have a serious problem with any belief system that actively encourages people to ignore it. It's hard enough to be vigilant and conscious and skeptical about your own biases and blind spots when you do prioritize reason and reality over instinct and personal feeling, without throwing spiritual faith into the mix. Now, there are some woo believers, neo-pagans and Wiccans especially, who take it all with a gigantic grain of salt. There are believers, I guess a better word would be practitioners, who see the ideas more as useful metaphors, who see the rituals as comforting and beautiful rather than literally effective. They see woo as a way of altering their consciousness, rewiring their own heads, rather than a way of directly changing external reality. And that kind of woo, I don't have a huge problem with. In fact, if that's really and truly how someone is practicing it, and they're not using it as a substitute for medicine or something, I don't think I have a problem with it at all. But I also think this can be a very dicey path to walk, a tricky balance to maintain. I remember from my own woo days how vague and half-assed my beliefs could be. And I remember how easily I would slip back and forth between thinking of my beliefs as literal and thinking of them as metaphorical. Mostly, they would slip back and forth depending on how hard they were being questioned. When I was with someone who was more skeptical, I'd lean towards the useful metaphor end of the spectrum. When I was with the other believers, I'd lean towards the, wow, isn't this freaky? Something weird must be really going on here end. And I know from experience that other woo believers do this as well. I think that if you're going to go the powerful metaphor / useful practice route, you need to be careful to do that consistently and with integrity, and not just as a way of dodging skeptical critique. But why? Why do you need to do this? Don't people have a right to believe whatever they like? Of course we have a right to believe whatever we want. We have the right to believe that a mystical spirit guides the tarot cards, that subatomic particles have free will, that the moon is made of green cheese, and that Jesus Christ is our personal savior, and anyone who doesn't agree is going to hell. That doesn't mean it's right for us to do so. When I say that it's not okay to just believe anything I want, I mean that I can't do so and be honest with myself. I can't do so and retain my intellectual integrity. I can't do so if I'm going to be a person who thinks that good decisions have to be based in reality, the best possible understanding of reality that we can have. I can't do so if I'm going to be a person who thinks that reality is more important and more interesting than her own wishful thinking. As the saying goes, you have the right to your own opinions, but you don't have the right to your own facts. And besides, our beliefs affect our behavior, not just our decisions about our own lives either. They affect how we treat other people. My decision to stay in a bad relationship because the tarot told me to didn't affect only me. My boss's decision to consult a pet psychic about her office cat didn't affect only her. For one thing, she spent money on a psychic at a time when she was having a hard time paying her staff. Some parents' erroneous belief that vaccines cause autism don't affect only them or only their children. Our beliefs affect our behavior towards others. And that makes our beliefs not just a personal question, but an ethical one. If it were possible to believe in woo, not in a useful metaphor way, but really believe in it, and not be held back by dogma, not be hurt emotionally, not hurt others, not lose reason as the guiding point of your life, then no, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But I just don't think that's possible. So that's what Greta Christina had to say on the topic. I wanted to wrap up with this thought. At the end of the section in the book, Crimes Against Logic, about the alleged right to your own opinion, the author states that for people who claim this right, truth is really not the point, and it is most annoying to be pressed on the matter. And to register this, to make it clear that truth is neither here nor there, they declare, I'm entitled to my own opinion. Once you hear these words, you should realize that it is simple rudeness to persist with the matter. The word rudeness suggests that to persist in challenging that person's opinions would be a sign of disrespect for them as a person. But I disagree. I think that to the extent that we agree with the previous arguments about the harms of abandoning reason and evidence as the basis for deciding how to act in the world, it's rather a sign that we care about these people enough to persist in trying to change their opinions, because that will lead them to avoid the harms that come with faulty thinking. So I'd like to close today with a quote that Richard Dawkins often shares from British journalist Johann Hari, who said, I have so much respect for you that I cannot respect your ridiculous beliefs. Thank you.